being in South Africa, we had apartheid, and I was born and raised in apartheid.
Hey, got something really cool I wanted to run by and let you know what's going on. So I'm starting a group that will start taking a deep dive into each one of these episodes. So we'll collectively come together and talk about the shows, talk about the guests. I'll be bringing back some of the guests to do some Q&A sessions and really take a further dive into their story, their journey, the episode, talk about, maybe some of the things you wish I would have asked on the episodes, do some Q&A sessions and the like. As a friend put it to me, it's really like a book club, but for the podcast. So a couple times a week, we'll go in, we'll break down the favorite shows of the week, and have cool discussions around everything that we've heard, we've learned, and want to know about their journey. Some of these guests will come in and they'll teach part of, what makes them awesome at what they do. And then, as always, I'll be providing regular value and content in this group. It's really cool because this only is going to cost $5 a month to join this group. And you'll be able to come in, interact with everybody else in there. So I'll put a link right in the show notes for this that you can jump in, come have a conversation with us, and we will really deep dive into each one of these episodes and help us all rise up together. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's going to be a great show today. Having the show wasn't something I started out to do. But the day I found out somebody wanted to really sponsor the show was a really, really cool experience. So, guys, I want you to take some time to go check out Point Blank Safety Services and their new nonprofit, Blue Family Fund. These guys are doing some really, really cool things. And Stacey McGovern, who's the CEO over there, has been a dear friend, and she was a guest on the show. But these guys are literally taking, the off-duty officers and putting them out in security guard role. And here's what's cool about it is, as they're protecting our lives, they don't make a whole lot of money in that regard. No first responders are paid for the value they provide for our safety and our health and taking care of us. So these guys, Stacy and her team over at Point Blank Safety Services have really found a cool way to give back to these officers by helping them provide an additional income so they can continue to support and protect us. So do me a favor, guys. Seriously, go check out pointblanksafety.com and then go look at their nonprofit, which is Blue Family Fund. Now, this nonprofit was created because of the success of Point Blank Safety Services. They wanted to give back to the families of fallen officers and be able to give scholarships away to the families of current, police officers. So do me a favor. It would mean the world to me if you would go out and help support this show by supporting Point Blank Safety Services and their nonprofit Blue Family Fund. Just tell them Donnie has sent you. You heard it on Donnie's Success Champions, and Stacy will take a tremendous and amazing care of you. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys, this is going to be a fun episode. I'm bringing you Tasneem all the way from South Africa, and we're going to talk about her journey of her parents going through their struggles to how they formed and shaped who she is, to her raising 4 kids while creating a company, going through occupational therapy, and ultimately creating this badass lifestyle she's figured out. Enjoy this episode. All right, guys, it's going to be another fun episode. I'm bringing you Miss Tasneem, I think I got that right, Abrahams, on today, and this should be a pretty fun episode. I wish you guys could see where she's sitting right now, but, I promise we'd only use the audio version of this. But Miss Tasneem, welcome to Success Champions. Please share us your story, tell us your journey. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. If you can recall, when we were back and forth on Facebook Messenger, I was saying I was feeling a little bit, should I tell my story? Because I've been listening to your podcast and some of the guests you've had on are amazing and their stories are so inspiring. And you encouraged me and said, you know what, everybody's journey, everybody has a story. I'd like to hear yours, so please do come on. So here I am.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to have you. So tell me a little bit about how you've gotten to where you are right now. Start from as far back as you want to go, and let's walk through it.
First of all, I don't know if you've had any guests from South Africa. I'm from South Africa. I'm currently in Johannesburg, but I was born and raised in Cape Town. I actually used to be an occupational, well, I shouldn't say used to be because I still am an occupational therapist, although I'm not practicing in the field anymore. And basically, I always knew that I wanted to be in a helping profession. I always knew I wanted to help people. And that's how I ended up in the health profession, naturally. But, you know, I always say I don't know how different my life would have been had I grown up in this generation, because obviously back then when I was growing up, there was no Facebook, there was no internet really.
And thank God for that.
I mean, life is so different now. I mean, we didn't have cell phones. I mean,
right.
If I tell my kids today that, you know, back then we didn't have cell phones, we still used those dial phones that you put your finger in and turn the dial.
And it was either sitting on a table or mounted to a wall, I mean.
Yeah, so, I mean, they always say, you know, like, you know, in every generation there are new jobs that never existed. So back then there was no such thing as a website consultant or a web designer, or you were either a coder, like a hardcore coder, or you were in IT, building computers. There was no such thing as a digital sort of career. So that was never an option for me. My dad, actually, incidentally, he was an information systems auditor. So he was sort of in that computer field. And my mom was always somebody who was very charitable, involved in all kinds of charities, giving. So in high school, I kind of did explore the computer science field. I thought I wanted to do computer science, but I just did, you know, the ones and noughts and all of that, which was coding in those days, that just wasn't for me. It was too boring. I couldn't see myself sitting in front of a computer looking at ones and noughts and if this, then that, and that kind of programming. So I was like, no, clearly that's not for me. And I followed more along the heart part, I always say, which is part of my mom. And I always kind of think growing up, you know, as an eldest daughter, I almost have half of each of my parents. So my dad has always been a very nerdy, geeky, kind of highly intellectual type person.
And you know he's going to hear this and know that you just called him nerdy and geeky, right?
Yeah, he totally knows that. My brother is completely geeky as well, and we proudly geek, I will say. And my mom, as much as she was also beautiful and intelligent, she was just all heart. You know, she always put everyone above herself. She always, you know, was in the soup kitchens and doing charity work and giving her last of everything to everyone. And so it was through her that I discovered the profession of occupational therapy. She always wanted to be a nurse, but when she was a child, she had polio, and so her one foot was deformed. And she always told us the story about how growing up she really, really wanted to be a nurse. One, she grew up in the apartheid era, and then two, when you wanted to be a nurse those days, she had to go for an assessment. The doctor had to basically say that she would cope with the long hours on her feet. And every time the doctor would say, ethically I can't, because if anything happens, I'm responsible. And she always tells us the story how she went to the beach as a teenager, and she sat on the beach and cried and cried and cried because that was all she wanted to do. And, you know, I always remember that story growing up because it just struck me how passionate she was about something she really wanted to do. And I always felt I wanted to find that same thing that I enjoyed so much that if somebody told me I couldn't do it, I would go and sit on a beach and cry and cry and cry. And I think the lesson I took from that was that in life, everything I always do with passion. So like people always say, oh, you must give your 100%. Like I don't do things if I don't feel I'm going to give it 100%. I always feel I must really be passionate about it. And that's how I felt about occupational therapy, because I could see it was a new profession in South Africa. there weren't that many of us, and people would always ask, what is occupational therapy? And I don't know, maybe people don't know what it is, so I should probably tell you.
Yeah, 100%.
Occupational therapy is really about the belief that we are defined by what we do and that you can actually achieve wellness through doing. So the idea is that, when you have a physical illness or disability, even a mental illness or disability, often the things that are impacted are your occupations, which are the things you do in your day-to-day life. And when you can't fulfill certain roles through your activities, that actually leads to more ill health. So, for example, if you have somebody who has legs amputated, for example, yes, they don't have their full body and they might be more challenged in doing the things they can do. But as OTs, we help those who had those challenges to still live their fulfilled life through activities, whether it's doing it in a different way or rehabilitation and so forth. I actually chose to go more the mental health route. And my first job was in a forensic unit. Forensic meaning so people who committed crimes due to mental health. And their crimes were such, and their mental state was such that they needed to be sent to an institution. So it was very long-term institutional rehabilitation. And some of the patients we had committed really serious crimes. So it was quite difficult coming fresh out of varsity, having to, work with people.
I'm really curious. I don't mean to cut you off. Were you doing the forensic interview at that point?
No, so these are people who had committed crimes and were found to be in the courts. What do they say? Yeah, unfit to stand trial, and then they are committed to a mental institution, and then we were in the rehabilitation unit. So, but you must understand, in South Africa, institutionalization is very different to what it is. I'm assuming to what it is in the States. Our hospitals, first of all, are not that well resourced. So, I don't know. My only reference point is from the movies, but
everything you see in the movies is real. So, it's like reading it on the internet.
Yeah, but I just know that in South Africa, we don't have a lot of resources. So we are severely understaffed. We don't have any computer equipment or proper management of the institutions. And then we don't have a lot of money for rehabilitation. So we're quite limited in what we can do. So if I can paint the picture, the forensic unit was basically about 100 forensic patients who would come at the same time to this big sort of courtyard with offices all around. And we were 2 occupational therapists with 4 or 5 occupational therapy assistants. And we would have to basically manage all of these 100 patients at the same time through doing different activities like, basket weaving or pottery or crafts, arts and crafts, and then life skills and all of those things. So it was quite an experience.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, but I actually, surprisingly, through that experience, I actually found my interest in understanding the human psychology, like what motivates people to do certain things. How do you help people sort of transform their thinking? A lot of these patients were substance-induced psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, and a lot of them committed crimes in a psychotic episode. So it was sort of understanding what is the circumstances surrounding, what helps them stay on their medication, support systems, all of those.
So I'm really curious. You got 100 people in a courtyard. You got you and one other occupational therapist, a handful of assistants.
Yes.
How the hell are you supposed to assess anybody in any reasonable manner under those conditions?
Exactly. This was exactly our challenge. And it became quite, as me as a fresh-faced, I was this fresh-faced occupational therapist. I was going to change
that's going to fix the world. Right.
Absolutely. And I came here, and the other thing you must understand is that when you go and work in an institution, a lot of these staff members have been working there for years, and that you become institutionalized yourself. So it was very frustrating for me as a new graduate who wanted to come in there and had all these fantastic ideas of the things we learned about in university, and the reality was so completely different because, as you say, you can't have that one-on-one time assessing people accurately and giving the one-on-one. So I was sort of tasked with identifying some patients who would benefit from a more smaller group life skills sort of group and put that into practice, but it didn't really have the full impact because it wasn't supported, for example, by the nursing staff. So what would happen is I would come up with this whole program that needed to be extended into the rest of the day when they go back to the wards, and you would speak to the nurses and they would not be interested. Anybody who knows the South African health system, as much as nurses, there are many great, fantastic nurses, don't get me wrong, but the majority of nursing in South Africa, and understandably so, because they are so overworked and under-resourced, that they become disinterested and apathetic. They're just going to get their hours through the day and get paid at the end of the day. There's no motivation to really put the patient first because they don't see any hope of that happening. So you would go in there and you would want to put some program in place in the ward, and the nurses would just not be interested because they saw it as you giving them more work.
Right.
And so nothing would actually happen. And so I became very unhappy with that whole institutionalization, and I knew that's not where I wanted to be. Fast forward a few years, I actually ended up in the UK, and that was like a completely eye-opening experience because I worked in a community team. You got to see, how they actually really put occupational therapy profession philosophy into use where, I was going to train young adults with learning difficulties how to integrate into society. So they would live in a house on their own independently with just a key worker to support them. And we would do like road safety training and, teach them how to shop and how to budget and how to cook. And it was so amazing. I enjoyed every minute of it. And I so much wanted to bring that back to South Africa. And we did eventually come back to South Africa, and I found this organization called Headway Gauteng, which is a non-profit organization that supports people with traumatic brain injury. So stroke, head injury from car accidents, epilepsy, anything to do with the head. And it was also sort of a community setting where people came. What happens in South Africa is that when you leave school at 18 and you have any form of disability, there's nothing. In South Africa, there's nothing. You don't get jobs. There's no day services, community programs. We are fully reliant on the non-profit sector to provide those kinds of services. Mm. And so, the people that come there, that's all they have. And they are so grateful for the time there. So as an OT, I actually chose to work in the outreach branch, which is more in the kind of a township area. And that was more of a community development role than actual therapy in terms of the head injury. So it was more kind of the community spirit and upliftment and empowerment and those kind of things. And I really enjoyed that. But what struck me, at the time, that was also the time where the digital age was starting to dawn upon us. Everyone had cell phones. Everybody was getting a website. The digital age was really rapidly expanding. And I really enjoyed being part of that. And all through these experiences working as an OT, one thing that struck me in South Africa is that there were many resources that I came to learn about that I was always surprised. Like I was always surprised that people didn't know about Headway, for example, when they were such a well-funded, well-run organization. And I realized it's because when you're in South Africa and you say you go onto the internet and you Google, where can I find a wheelchair for X, Y, and Z, you get a whole lot of like US, UK listings because that's where internet was growing first. And as you know, with the Google algorithm, it's like whoever gets the most traffic, that comes up first. So little Headway website is probably going to be on page like 100 or something. So if I'm searching,
it might as well not be there.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm searching for head injury programs in Johannesburg. I might not find it first, second, or third page, and so I'm not going to find it. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there was some place where people knew, okay, if I go to that website and I look for that specific resource that I'm looking for that disorder or that illness, and it will give me results specific to South Africa, some kind of a directory or something. And then if there was some kind of a forum where I could also ask other people who have a similar condition to me. And then I thought, okay, maybe I should just create that. So I asked my cousin who was in the web space at the time, and I asked, how much would it cost to set something like that up? And he's like, you know what? I'm going to set you up with a WordPress site, and you can just learn how to do it yourself. I'm sure you'll be able to do it. It's not that hard. So I was like, oh, okay. So he set me up with the domain on his server. He sponsored my domain and my hosting, and he installed WordPress, and off I went. And I tell you, I was hooked. I was hooked on this whole WordPress thing. I spent hours upon hours figuring out how to customize. And that time there weren't that many themes. I mean, there were themes, but they weren't as great as they are now. There were no page builders, no Squarespace where you can drag and drop and all of these things. Spent hours and hours. I finally got a site up which was so ugly, if I think about it now, but at the time I was besotted with this website. I thought it was the best thing I've ever seen. I was so incredibly proud of my website, but it was so ugly. And unfortunately it was hacked a few times because I didn't have the correct security and all of this stuff. So the website still doesn't exist. It's still a dream of mine to have this website. But what it did do was put me on this path. So I really enjoyed being involved with web design and being in the digital space. And what was also happening is at the time I kept falling pregnant. So I have 4 kids, 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I'm not somebody that can, when I have my babies, I get bored very easily. I really crave the mental stimulation of being around other people. And for a long time, we were on our own because we moved different cities. We were never in the same city as our parents, so we didn't have grandparents support us. So it was difficult to go back to work. And I always wanted to be as much as possible at home with my kids, but I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I have so much respect for women who stay at home with their kids, because quite honestly, my kids drive me nuts. I cannot be at home with them. I'm sorry. They know I can only handle a certain amount of time with them.
So are your kids on Instagram, Snapchat? I mean, what social? I just want to know where to send this podcast to so they can hear mom say that.
My eldest is actually on everything. He dreams of being a YouTube millionaire one day.
Right.
On everything. But they know that they drive me nuts. But they also know that that I have made decisions in my life that allows me to be there for them as much as possible. I mean, it's difficult to be a woman with kids, with or without kids, in that every choice you make is always going to be judged. You never are going to be accepted for, if you decide to be a full-time working mom, you're judged for that. If you decide to be a full-time stay-at-home mom, you're judged for that choice. If you decide to do both, you're judged for that choice. It's like every choice, whether you breastfeed, don't breastfeed, whether every choice you make is judged. And so it's really hard. And then on top of that, with social media and everybody telling you what you shouldn't, before, in the good old days, I would say, it was your kind of immediate community was it was good and bad in that you were kind of forced to go according to what your immediate community was doing. But on the other hand, you weren't bombarded with so much information. Right. And now it wasn't other people on the outside world judging you. So to me, it's like you kind of have to, I always, from the beginning, I decided that I wasn't going to be influenced by what society was telling me. I needed to do what was good for me and my soul and what I was going to be happy with. So I did decide at first I was going to stay at home with the kids, but I knew that I wasn't going to be healthy or at my full potential if I wasn't doing something with my brain. So I started doing content writing online. That was the time when content marketing started to grow, because websites were now, everybody was having websites, and there was the whole thing about Google algorithms were coming into play, and people wanted to be found online. And so they realized they needed to create valuable content. And so the natural thing for me was to write medical content. So people selling any kind of health-related industry websites would need to have articles on depression, anxiety, any kind of mental health articles. So I would be that ghostwriter, the person writing the content. And I really enjoyed that, but it was also quite monotonous. And with doing the website on the side and learning how to do that and really enjoying that, I actually started to become good at it. And so fast forward down the line, I had an opportunity to join this incubator called the Aweta Project. And I joined the incubator, and it was through that I actually formed my business, which is called Digital Engage. This was 2.5 years ago. And I would say that my biggest mistake, although I don't really like to call it a mistake, because I think it was a necessary process. And this is important to remember, I think, for all entrepreneurs, is that there's a process that you have to go through. And some of us will go through that process longer than others. Some people will already come in with certain knowledge and experience, and so their process is a lot quicker. For me, because I didn't come from a corporate world, I didn't come from a background of having studied digital marketing or anything. Most of what I knew was either self-taught or through short courses. So my process was a lot longer. And in the beginning, when I first formed my business on the 1st of October 2015, I registered my business. I wanted to be everything to everyone. I wanted to offer SEO. I wanted to do AdWords, WordPress design, anything. So
you were insane. Got it.
I was insane, yes. And, I quickly learned that you can't do that. You have to first understand who it is that you're trying to serve, and you have to understand what it is that you are really good at. And if there is something that should be part and parcel of your service, and you're not expert at it, and you're not really good or passionate, and you can't spend your time on that, then you should be outsourcing that or hiring somebody into your business to do that for you. Okay. And I wasn't doing that.
This is awesome. I just want to recap a little bit, because holy shit, girl, you've done a lot. So, all right, here we go. So you started off in occupational therapy, working with a bunch of crazy-ass people that had caused some very dark crimes in an impossible situation trying to counsel people. You end up going to the UK and finding a beautiful organization that teaches you a different way to take your skill set, and then you try and bring that back to South Africa. And found an organization right there. Then you wanted to create this website that people could find all the stuff, because the SEO sucked in South Africa, which led you into your cousin introducing you to WordPress, which unlocked this machine that you now are. And you create a company that's building websites and doing SEO and social media for everybody else, while you had 4 kids along the way, and you're being a mom in the midst of all this. Are you nuts?
Yeah, you know what? It's like I said at the beginning. I am quite spontaneous like that. I have an idea in my head. I really like the idea, and then I just go for it. And then after the thing, holy shit, what am I doing? I don't have time to do all these things. But you know what? You find time for the things that you are passionate about. And 100%. I don't know where I heard that or read that, but somebody said that you shouldn't say, I don't have time for that. You should say, it's not a priority for me right now. Because when you say that, it changes your mindset and to realize you have time for anything and everything as long as it's a priority, because you will make time for something that's important to you, right? So my kids also, I teach them, they need to understand that as much as they are one of the most important things in my life, there are other things in my life that
annoy the hell out of you. I just want to make sure we got it.
So they know that as much as I've made choices in my life to be able to be with them in the afternoon. When we come from school run, I'm here in the day. Yes, I'm in my office working, but if I need to pick them up from school, if I need to take them to the doctor, I can do those things because I've chosen a life of entrepreneurship to give me the flexibility to be able to be there for them during the important times. And so I'm hoping that would also teach them a life lesson, that there are certain, and I don't like to call it sacrifices. Like my husband would always say, you've sacrificed such a lot for us because he has to work, and he sees it as me making a sacrifice, having given up, building, say, a career in occupational therapy to be at home. But I don't see it as a sacrifice because to me, I've made a choice. A sacrifice is when when you feel you didn't have a choice and you begrudgingly take a different route. I don't see it as that. I see it as making a life choice. If you've chosen something, then that's not a sacrifice. If somebody gives you an apple and an orange and you have to choose one and you choose an apple, you're not sacrificing the orange, you're choosing the apple.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So that's how I kind of view everything in life, is that you shouldn't, because when you view something as a sacrifice, it changes sort of how you perceive it and how you feel about it. And you shouldn't take something on begrudgingly because it's something you're doing as a sacrifice.
Absolutely. How did you find this tenacity? One, to fight the status quo of being a woman in South Africa, creating this world and being judged at every move you make. And not just women are judged that way. I'm sure it's worse for women than it is for guys, but we all get judged for every choice and decision. I mean, even on the podcast, I get people that will send me a comment as, I can't believe you said X at X time. I'm like, get over it. It's amazing that you found some sort of grit to keep pushing through, to keep chasing this idea as you continue to expand your company. And like most entrepreneurs, the thing you started out doing did not necessarily become the thing that you're doing. Because it always evolves into, like me, I started out as a motivational speaker and coach, and now most of my business is transitioning over to this podcast, which is just a blast doing. Right? So where'd you find this tenacity at? Was it something you've always had, or is it learned?
Well, I think that it's, I think a lot of it comes from my parents. My parents, being in South Africa, we had apartheid, and I was born and raised in apartheid. Fortunately,
Okay, back up. You're born and raised in what?
Apartheid. So South Africa went through a really dark period where the nationalist government actually passed laws that separated the races. It wasn't just your usual, I know in the US you also had the time where it was white-only schools, but it was more systemic than that. It was systemic in the sense that, if I can give you an example.
Please.
My father grew up in a certain area, and during his lifetime, people were actually forcibly removed from their houses. So they were told, the police would come and say, everybody, you need to vacate your houses. We're taking these houses now. We're going to demolish them. You need to move to that area.
Oh, wow.
And so what they would do is they would actually, it was very well thought out, socially engineered, that they purposefully wanted to create division between different groups. It was that whole divide and conquer kind of philosophy. So what they would do is they would put all black people in certain areas, and even within the black community, they would split them into tribes, and they would make it very clear that certain tribes have a higher sort of ranking than others. Then the colored community. So colored in South Africa, colored isn't as in darker skin. Colored is a very specific cultural group. So colored would be either people who are mixed race, or from the Cape Malay community, or from the Khoisan, which is the Khoisan would be kind of like what the Red Indians would be to the US. They're the actual natural inhabitants of the land. So they would be put in a certain group, and it would be made clear that colored people are superior to black people. And then there were Indian people, and Indian meaning people who descended from actual India that were brought over as slaves. And some of them came over and they were actually also put in another, sort of group to say that they were superior. And then it was the white people. So it was a really dark time in that there were lots of forced removals. People were taken from their land and made to live in certain other areas, and you weren't allowed to have certain jobs, and et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
So, with my parents having grown up like that, I was quite sheltered from that reality because I was still very young when Mandela was released and the schools were open, et cetera, et cetera. But I always knew the stories of their struggle in that my dad, like I explained in the beginning, he's a very highly intelligent man. He loves computers, but he was never afforded the opportunity to go and study at university. Back then, if you were a non-white male, you had to either go into a service like, sweeper, that kind of thing, or you had to be a teacher if you wanted like a profession. So you couldn't go and study to be a doctor or an engineer or computer scientist, any of that. What happened was that he got a job without having any degree, got a job in a company, and they recognized his intelligence and they gave him a chance. And he actually self-taught in information systems.
Wow.
And through the years, he sort of went up in, he became, better at what he was doing, and he moved up in the company. Apartheid was now no longer, so he had better opportunities open to him. And I remember going to his graduation. He was actually, without having an undergraduate degree, because of his years of experience and his actual achievement in the field, they gave him, he was allowed to do a postgraduate degree at university in information systems auditing. And it was such a proud moment for me as a teenager to go to my dad's graduation, knowing what he had to kind of overcome to get there. And then it was the story of my mom as well, because having polio as a child from a non-white family, she wasn't afforded the same health care and rehabilitation. So that was a large part why she was not allowed to get into nursing. So it was kind of just, I think it was just they improved their station in life despite those challenges. And my mom, my mom, sadly, she passed away just 2 years ago. She had cancer, but she was always, anybody who knew my mom knew that she was all heart. She was somebody that gave everything of herself. And they were actually living in the UK at the time that we went over, and she was working in some retail store. And I remember when we were there for 2 years, she looked after my eldest son, who was like 2 years older. And I remember when I left, I was, I knew that we had given her this gift of having time with her grandson. And now we were taking it away by going back to South Africa. And she gave up her job in the shop to look after him. And now we were going, what was she going to do? She wasn't going to be happy going back into working into a shop after she was being fulfilled so much by this role. And I walked, where I lived, we drove past this, like a care home, a nursing home. And they had a sign outside that had vacancies. So I went in there and I asked, what do you need to be able to be a care worker? They said, no, you don't need anything. We do the training, all of this. So I got an application form. I gave it to her. I said, there's this care home. It's not a nursing job, but it's kind of similar. In fact, what my mom wanted to do nursing, it wasn't about the medical side of the nursing. It was literally just, she loved looking after and caring for older people. And so she went for the interview, she got the job. And I'll tell you that the years that she worked there were the happiest of her life.
Yeah, you absolutely changed her life at that point.
You know what? I don't think it as I changed her life. I always believe that you are meant to see and experience certain things. It's up to you to kind of have your eyes open at the time to see what's
well said.
So, I must have driven past that home like every day for that 2 years, but I saw that sign and I knew that that's what needed to be done. And, she was so happy because she was also a very artistic person, very crafty. She used to make all of those like Biggie Best lampshades and all of those things that people put on their toilets they have no business putting on their toilets. She did all of those things. The little doilies for the back of the toilet toilet in all of those. She made all of those things. She was very crafty and artistic, and
everything you think about when you think of a grandmother. Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So she started off, caring for these older people, and she enjoyed it. She actually enjoyed like washing them, cleaning them, feeding them, doing all the kinds of things that people traditionally would think, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. She enjoyed that. She loved it. But then she started doing activities with them. And, she was the kind of person that would go in on a day off because, there's some activity that needed to be done. Or she would help the carers when that's not her job, or she was there for something else. That was her. So I think that side of things is what I get from her, is that I always go beyond what is required of me because that's what I enjoy, and I saw that in her.
Well, here's the cool thing about that is I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I know what I've learned from my parents. I mean, my dad, changed our family's life when he made a big move the family from Kansas to Texas, and he did an online electrical course through the mail electrical course that ultimately allowed him to finally land his dream job at Xerox.
Wow.
But the interesting thing about all this is, as parents or as kids looking up to their parents, somebody's always watching. And whatever you do in life, especially if you have kids, or like my nieces and nephews are always checking in what I'm doing with my company because I'm the cool uncle that lets them I'm the one who lets them get away with shit they probably shouldn't get away with. But, but the actions and the things we do in life, there's eyeballs on us that are being inspired by what we're doing. So I will tell you, girl, the fact that you are chasing this whole dream with your company, building the websites, you're inspiring your kids and what their choices they'll make later in life. They're going to see these sacrifices as far as what you've given up, even though you don't feel like you've given up, to chase your dreams. That's a beautiful thing, girl. That really, really, really is.
No, thank you. That really is the hope, is that they will, see that the world, they're growing up in a different world. They don't have to contend with apartheid. They don't have to, the world is open to them. Also, I mean, that's the thing with living in a digital world, is that they get to experience things outside of their immediate environment. When I was growing up, all I knew was my little community. And I mean, I remember the first time when I was a child, I grew up in Cape Town, and then my family moved to Johannesburg. And when I went to Johannesburg was the first time I came into contact with a white person. And I was 12. That was the first time I came into contact with somebody who was white. And then it was also the first time I came into contact with somebody who was Jewish. Now, being a Muslim girl, being in a school with Jewish white children, it was like a whole new world to me.
Oh, I get it. I get it. Just 2 seconds is when I was growing up in Kansas, we never saw black people. My first time being around a black person, I was 11 years old, in Texas. I get it. Then I got put in the Marine Corps, and you're living amongst everybody. It's a culture shock. I get it. It's wild.
It is. But and so now our kids, they don't have that bubble because they are exposed to the world. They can't escape it. They see things. But so while that's a good thing, it's also a bad thing in that if they are exposed to the wrong things, then, they might learn the wrong things about the world. So as parents, we kind of have to be the buffers we have this responsibility that we don't want to shut them off to the world, but at the same time, we want them to not be influenced by the bad stuff.
It's a very wild balance because you become your influences. So whatever you're consuming is what you're becoming. So wow.
No, so I mean, I think, so I mean, besides I still am involved with occupational therapy more on a voluntary basis. I'm on the board of the Josie for Autism, which is an organization that is involved with providing or increasing awareness about autism, specifically in the underprivileged areas. In South Africa, we still have so many townships where people don't have running water, they don't have electricity. I mean, children that are still going to school where they don't have textbooks. You know, they're sitting like 50 children in a class where there's only 20 desks. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating here.
Wow.
You know, and then we still have, you know, that the legacy of apartheid still lives in that because of the way people were segregated, the communities that developed there had a whole lot of social issues that developed around that. So, I mean, it's kind of like you would say in, you know, in slum areas in any country. The social issues that arise there, it's not because of the people, their race or anything like that. It's because those are systemic problems that have developed over time. So we have so much of that. I mean, a lot of the colored communities are really ridden in gangsterism and drugs. So that's a big challenge in those communities again.
Well, just to put that into perspective is people are born into that lifestyle, so it's all they become to know, right? So growing up, I always struggled with the thought process. I'm like, well, just get out of that. I mean, why stay in that? But if that's all you know, right, that's all you've experienced, you don't understand that you should be trying to get out of that, right, that you should be trying to better yourself. I mean,
and so, but that's why I think, like, if you're a man, it's your responsibility to be a good male role model. If you're a woman, your responsibility to be a good female role model. Whatever you are in your identity, you must always think that you are representing everybody else that ticks any one of those boxes. And so it is a responsibility of each of us as individuals to kind of put our best self forward so that somebody else, anybody, you never know who you might meet or might come across you and really relate to something about you and then think, wow, if that guy can do that, then I can do that too, or, you know.
And that's 100% the reason I do this podcast, is to hear people's stories. So hopefully somebody else listening to the show will hear their story, will be inspired, and go tackle life with it. Holy cow, girl, what an amazing ride you've been on. And you were worried you didn't have a story to tell.
Yeah.
So where do you think this is all taking you, hon? I mean, you got the website company. Are you going to be a world-famous rapper? I mean, no, I'm just kidding. Where's this all taking you? Where are you going to go with it?
Well, you know what? I actually developed this real passion for entrepreneurship because I was on this journey, and I actually realized through this, now being 2.5 years in, I only this year really defined for myself what I wanted to do. I realized that my personality archetype is that I'm a helper. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I always liked helping people, and that I'm a doer. So I always struggled with how do I connect my occupational therapy self with my business self. And I realized, well, if you are providing a service to small businesses, and I needed to start viewing it as I'm not there to provide a website to a business. I am there to help that business achieve their goals, because they could then go on to, employ somebody and change it. So there's like this ripple effect. And so I realized that I needed to kind of define my business around that my business is not to provide websites. My business is to help you achieve your business goal through the tools that I have, which is websites. And that's why I don't call myself a web designer. I call myself a website consultant, because it's about how do I help businesses get online. These days you have to be online some way or the other, whether it's social media, but your website is kind of your main sort of place where you convert customers. And I'd really like to grow the business now. That's where I'm at now, is to really grow the business to a place where I don't have to be in the business all the time. I still am the business, and I want to get to a point where I'm no longer the business. The business can run without me, so that I can focus on other projects. One of them being my podcast. I also have a podcast. It's called The Daily Hustle, and it really focuses more on the journey of entrepreneurship. because I listen to a lot of podcasts because it's quite a lonely journey and I wanted to hear from other people. But I found that a lot of the entrepreneurship podcasts focused on people who were really super successful, were making the the typical seven-figure business, whatever. And I wanted to hear more from people like me who were not yet seven figures or whatever. They haven't achieved, top 30, under 30 and all of these wonderful words. They're just everyday people grinding away, trying to achieve their dreams. And also because I realized everybody's definition of success is not the same.
Oh, well, good. So when do I get to become a guest on your show?
Anytime. I'm open to get so much show. I love having guests on my show. It's really about that. Anybody I say that the podcast is about people on different various stages of the entrepreneurial journey. So it doesn't have to be somebody who's already achieved success. I've interviewed even a home industry mom. So, this particular woman, she also has 4 kids. She has a catering business. She's not looking to become the next sort of celebrity caterer or whatever. Her definition of success is that she provides a good life for her family, that her children get to never miss out on opportunities. That's her definition of success. She's not chasing the 7-figure dream, and that's okay. So what are the challenges that she has to face? Or I had another guest who's a single mom and she's building an events company, and so those are the kind of stories I wanted to hear, the people who are currently in the trenches. What are their current struggles and lessons that they've learned? And that's how the Daily Hustle came about.
Love it. Well, girl, we are getting stacked up against the hour, so we're going to have to get ready to wrap this up. But I got to tell you, in all seriousness, thank you for sharing your journey with us. For a young lady that was worried if she'd have a story to tell, you've got one hell of a story, girl. I really appreciate it. So here's how I like to wrap up every podcast. And just so we forewarned, I do stump some people with this question. So if you were going to leave my audience with a quote, a phrase, a statement, a thought, something they could carry with them in their tool belt, especially when they're stacked up against it and life's getting tough, what would you say?
Well, you actually don't stump me with this, because this is my own personal kind of quote, life motto or whatever. It's that you need to let brave be the partner of fear, because fear helps you prepare and brave helps you act.
I love that.
Why that's my motto is because there's all this thing about being fearless. I don't believe you need to be fearless. Fearless is very important. Fear is very important. I don't believe you need to be fearless. You need to be courageous. You need to be brave. Because, without fear, we would be stupid. We would do stupid things. You need to be cautious, and you can't now just go and do something because you're being fearless. You have to think about it. And that's one of the lessons in business that you always hear from all the people who have been successful, is that, you need to have a plan, you need to have a vision, you need to have a plan, and then you need to act. So if you don't have those 3 things and you're just doing things, throwing caution to the wind, that's being fearless, and that's just stupid. So that's my quote.
Well said. Well, my dear, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been awesome. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. I look forward to following the rest of your journey.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know what, guys? Really, thank you for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun putting these together. I wanted to make sure before we get out of here that you knew what we were doing with social content. What we found was, because of the podcast, we have a unique way of helping you get your social content out on a very easy way. What we're doing is we're interviewing people, and from that interview, we will capture a lot of information that will then be turned into videos, memes, articles, all things you can use for your social content. I know, like for me, one of the biggest struggles I had was, what do I put out there? What do I say on a regular basis? Well, we'll help do all that for you. So if this is at all of interest to you, reach out to us and let us help you grow your social media channel. I can tell you I did this for my business, and my social media is completely taking off. My Instagram, since I started doing this, jumped to over 10,000 followers. and it continues to grow. So if this is at all of interest to you, check the bottom of the show notes for the link that says, Get My Social Content Done right now.